Enrichment, Enlightenment, Transformation. Rabbi Yisroel Cutler, the spiritual leader of Chabad of Cary, North Carolina, guides anyone who has been searching for a meaningful life and conscious living. Join our discussions about the mundane, our daily activities, and then infuse every day with a spiritual twist from the inspired sages of the Talmud and Jewish mysticism, which many call Kabbalah. We learn from the root source of all religious monotheistic traditions and delve into the symbolism and levels of meaning from biblical stories.
Good morning. Good to be back here. Thank you to everyone who's joining us here in Cary, as well as the online audience. We missed you the last few weeks. Thank you for joining in. Today is August 16th. We are doing the Parsha of the week, which is Va'et Hanan. We are already in the last book of the Torah. We're in Deuteronomy, which means we're rounding third base, which means the high holidays are not so far away. You always get that reminder when you enter the last book of the Torah, which is a beautiful book. Those that were at Chabad this past Shabbat, we discussed the significance of the last book of the Torah being called Devarim, which means words. And it's one long speech by none other than Moses. And the biggest irony is he starts his career by saying, I'm not a man of words. So it's incredible how he begins his career, I'm not a man of words, and he finishes with this long talk, which of course goes hand in hand. It's specifically someone who is not about words that's able to deliver these tremendous truths. But in this week's portion, he recounts some of the main events of Jewish history. He recounts the Ten Commandments, the Exodus, and the Shema, the most central Jewish prayer, finds its way in this week's Torah portion. So it's a good time to discuss the Shema, and in particular, we're going to focus on just one detail in the Shema. You should write it on your doorposts. And mind you, that is all the Bible says about a mezuzah. So if you ever needed some sort of hint, allusion that there must be an oral Torah as well, can you imagine? All it says is you should write it on your doorpost. Oh, how do you say doorpost in Hebrew? Mezuzah. The word mezuzah literally means a doorpost. That's what it means. It has come to mean in traditional Judaism, in Judaism and rabbinic thought, the item that we stick on the mezuzah, we eventually we eventually called it a mezuzah. But it's just interesting how
it's the Beit mezuzah that's gotten all the PR.
That we're going to get there as well. So it's just interesting how, that's a good trivia question. If you ask someone, what is a mezuzah? The most accurate answer would be a doorpost, in any event. But let's take a step back. The Shema's in the Torah portion. And the Shema, which is the most central Jewish prayer, has a structure to it. It begins with the idea. And the idea is Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, that we have one God. And not just one as in number, but a unity in the world, a unity in our lives. There is no place in the world that is empty from God. So we're supposed to fixate our idea, fix our minds, focus on this idea that there's a oneness in our lives and a oneness in the world. But that's not enough for it just to be in our minds. So what are we then supposed to do with that concept that there's one God watching over us at all times? What are we supposed to do with that? One is, the Shema continues, take it to your heart. What do we call that? Love. Ve'ahavta, you should love God. So the first thing the Shema continues is love God. If you think about a God that's always watching you, caring for you, every detail of your life is under God's control, that leads to love. Then it goes one step further. Not only should it be love, but it should translate into the words that we speak. So what does the Shema say? You should teach it to the children. Not only that, sometimes we need reminders. And the Shema continues with two reminders. You should take the message of Adonai Echad and you should bind it to your arms, which becomes the mitzvah of what we call tefillin. And you should take the mitzvah of the Shema and bind it to your environment, which we call the mitzvah of Mezuza. So there's a structure to the Shema that many people they fail to recognize. Mind, heart, words, body, house. That's the flow of the Shema. So let's continue to just read that inside. Text 1, page 74. Dennis, you can read. From the Shema.
And these words which I command you this day shall be upon your heart, and you shall teach them to your sons, and speak of them when you sit in your house, when you lie down, and when you rise up. And you shall bind them for a sign upon your hand, and they shall be for ornaments between your eyes. And you shall inscribe them upon the doorpost of your house and upon your gates.
Those are the words that we say so often. Interesting, it mentions you should say the Shema when you lie down and when you get up. That, of course, is the biblical source for the reciting Shema twice a day. It's important. Twice a day. Why? Because the verse says when you lie down and when you get up. Okay. Any
What
questions?
about ornaments between your eyes?
See, once again, tefillin is an odd word. Actually, it doesn't say the word tefillin. It says ukshartam la'ot. You should put it as a sign between your eyes. And it's a reference to the tefillin that is worn between the eyes.
Totafot. Even totafot
It's
is
an
a
odd
crazy word.
And here's where, again, if I often tell people, those that say, I believe in the written Torah, but not in the oral tradition. And I hear that all the time. And that's, different people have different beliefs. But I turn to people often and I say, you got to at least for some things rely on the oral tradition. Because if you don't rely on the oral tradition, I mean, the fact that you have a mezuzah on your house, what is a mezuzah? What should you write on your doorposts? What? How? When? So when it comes to these two mitzvot, tefillin and what we're going to focus on today, mezuzah, so much of it is oral tradition, and so much of it is not even interpreted oral tradition, but oral tradition that was simply passed on, the laws themselves. It's not interpretation. It's not like they're figuring stuff out from the words. Behind the scenes, Moses is told a lot of information about what a mezuzah is supposed to look like. And it's interesting because you look in history and you read Josephus is a historian who lived at the times when Josephus about 2,000 years ago. Am I accurate there? Josephus? Okay. He writes an ancient tradition of the Jews putting up a mezuzah. So this is, Jews were doing this, and he discusses on the doors they would have this. In the Dead Sea Scrolls, which we would have to have an entire class on how we look at the Dead Sea Scrolls, because there are differences in some of the texts. Interesting. It was from a group of Jews that sort of lived on alone, one of the breakaway groups at that time. But one thing that was consistent in their texts were mezuzah. They had the little mezuzahs, and it's the same two paragraphs of the Shema on their mezuzahs. There were 8 of them, 8 mezuzahs found amongst the Dead Sea Scrolls. So there's a real consistency amongst the mezuzah. What?
I was just reflecting. They actually found actual mezuzahs.
The scrolls, yeah.
Or mezuzot.
Correct. It had the different kind of Hebrew writing.
Okay.
The font was different. It was not what the font that we have today. It's called Tab Ivri. But that 8 of those were found amongst the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Wow.
So it's these things are neat. When we see thousands of years Jews have doing this, and it sort of supports that there must have been an oral tradition that does that. And yeah.
Isn't this the line where the Chabad movement gets sitting during the Shema and the Reform movement gets standing during the Shema?
Good question. So it's not a Chabad particular. Let me turn this to everyone in the crowd before we make this into where you grew up. Do they sit or stand during the Shema? Stand. Anyone else? This is
Stand.
okay. Stand. Interesting. So good question. There's actually a debate in Jewish law, like many things, about this line. You should do it when you lie down and when you get up. So if you look in the Talmud, there's a debate. Hillel says it refers to the times of day you say the Shema. You should say it when? In the AM and in the PM. And if you look in Jewish law, it actually details what time of day do people get up and what time of day do people get down, and the exact time of day you're supposed to say Shema by. Shammai, and I'll hold the thought, says no, it's not referring to times, it's referring to positions. In the morning, you should say Shema how? In the morning, getting up. And when you go to sleep at night, the bedtime Shema should be sitting or lying down. Okay. So there was this debate that sort of went throughout history, and in most instances, we know that when there's a Talmudic argument, They decided based upon the majority. Hillel usually won most of those. By the way, these arguments were very different than today's kind of arguments. They respected each other's positions and argued about issues. And in any event, the halacha was fixed like Hillel, which means it's the time. And it makes no difference. You can stand or sit. Either one is fine. Either one is fine. There's no problem standing or sitting because halacha is not like Shammai, it's like Hillel. That being said, if people were sitting for the rest of the service and all of a sudden got up for Shema, it might look like you're following the opinion of Shammai. You get that or not? If you're sitting and then you specifically stand when you get to, so again, it makes no difference whether you sit or stand. But in some places in Jewish tradition, it says if you were standing anyways, remain standing, not a problem. But to specifically stand, some could think that you're following Shammai. The fact that none of us in the room have ever heard of this before probably shows that no one in the room is going to be thinking you're following Shammai if you specifically stand for Shema. It's not a big deal. Either.
It's still important to do it.
Exactly.
And, you know,
Exactly.
What if
So
in
the
morning
positions
you
are
stand,
not.
what if in the morning you stand, in the evening you sit, and you say you're following both of them?
Oh, there we go.
I think the only thing I remember is that eyes closed.
Eyes closed, and that I
Yeah,
think
sitting,
was universal. The eyes
standing.
closed. You know, the story where there's this synagogue where every time they get up to this particular prayer, there's this argument, debate, stand, sit, and everyone's fighting. And one day this new rabbi rolls into town. You know, the new rabbi says, I want to put an end to all this bickering over here, you know, and he starts digging up where did this community thing start from. And he speaks to one congregant, another congregant, and each congregant says, for as long as I can remember, we were bickering about it. So finally he finds one of the founding members. Sadly, the woman's in an old age home and goes there, very hard to even communicate. And they're trying to explain to her, they're trying to settle this old argument, you know, standing or sitting. And they brought a group from the congregation to this lady, and they start explaining the dilemma. And they said, were we standing? And the other says, no, I bet you were sitting. And they said, no, were you standing? And they start arguing, and she goes, aha, that was the tradition. We always argue. And then, all right, Jews, all right. Joke. All right, let's go back over here. This is the Shema. Let's highlight the end. You should put it, inscribe it, because the word in Hebrew, uchtaftam, means you should write it on your doorposts of Beitecha, your house, uvisharecha, your gates. In the old days, people lived in sort of courtyards. Many of these communities were these kind of like, they had a bunch of houses, and at the beginning of that neighborhood was a gate. Still have some of those today. So
But it wasn't a gated community.
So that is the meaning of gate, if you're ever wondering what it means. It was sort of a group of houses that had an entrance to the group of houses. In Hebrew, that's called a chatzer. So that is all we have in the written Torah. We need to go to the oral Torah to talk about the traditions of the Mezuza. And like I said, these have been around for a long time, and these are not things that were interpreted or debated about later on, but these were actually traditions that were passed down from the very beginning about Mezuza. And therefore, it's close to my heart that it's done in the right way, and it bothers me. It hurts me that there are many mezuzot that are sold today that are just not accurate, and it's sad. They're photocopied, which we know are not. We're going to get to in a moment, and it has to be written. It has to be written in a very special way, and it's one thing if you were to advertise it that way, but what hurts me is that people are profiting, making money on selling items that are not what we call kosher. Kosher is used in many contexts outside of food itself. So you had a question, and I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. One thing I do remember as a child, or I heard this somewhere, and you shall bind them for a sign upon your hand, and they shall be for frontlets between your eyes. Where did I get that from?
The different translations. There's no good translation for this Hebrew word totafot. You ever heard of the word phylacteries? That's another English word for tefillin.
It's probably Greek.
I don't.
I would
But
It's sort of like what's a
like
translation of a
synagogue.
So it's the same idea that you should have a
But it's not between your eyes.
So that's another discussion. So we'll save that for the class on the tefillin. Let's stick to the mezuzah. Let's stick to the mezuzah today. colleague of mine once was at someone's house, just asking if they had a mezuzah. They said, we do have a mezuzah. And he said, do you mind if I look at it? Because, they're sure that it's kosher. It's empty. It's empty. And he says, it's empty. He's like, what do you mean? He's like, wasn't there a scroll? He goes, oh, you mean the instructions in Hebrew? I threw those out. So the first thing to clarify, of course, the first thing to clarify is that the mezuzah is the scroll. Cases can come in all shapes and sizes. You can have whatever kind of case you want. There are not many laws about the case. The laws are all when it comes to scroll. I guess the only law of a case that I can think of would be that a mezuzah that is in a bedroom, better that it's not see-through. Many of the cases that you get from me sometimes are those cheap plastic acrylic see-through ones. Those are better not inside of the bedroom. That's the only case, because it says when the actual scroll is visible, it's better not to be in a place where there's undressing and whatnot. That's the only law when it comes to the case. Otherwise, you can have as simple a case or nice a case as possible.
But it's outside the door of the bedroom.
Oh, then it's not a problem. It depends on the way the door opens.
Oh.
Absolutely.
The door opens to the inside.
It's not a
and you're
problem.
putting it on
The
the
problem is if it is on the inside and it is, thank you for that important clarification. Let's do some of these texts very briefly.
That's why I have a laugh.
So we're going to have two sides of this. We have 25 minutes left, and two sides of this. One is practical and one is message. Before we get into the practical, what do you think the message of the mezuzah is? It says you should take, again, Adonai Echad, concept of belief in God. Why does the Shema finish? You should put it on your house. What do you believe? There's no right or wrong answer here. What do you think the message of that is?
This house belongs to God.
It's a constant reminder of your Judaism, your connection with God.
Good. So it's a reminder. It's an ownership. Anything else? Any other perspectives? Beautiful.
Protection.
We're going to talk about the protection.
Never forget.
Never forget. All these beautiful. We're going to touch upon those in a moment. Let's Hal, you gonna. So let's now do 2A. Please.
The two passages, Shema and Vahai,
V'haya im Shamoa. That is the second paragraph of Shema.
are written in a single column on a single sheet of parchment. Approximately half a fingernail of space should be left above and below the writing. Sufficient empty space should be left in the beginning to cover it when it's rolled up.
Okay, so to explain what that means, I brought one here, and actually brought two here, and I brought two for a reason. Let's show you this one. So you have two paragraphs, you see, the first one and the second, and notice how it said there should be a little bit of space at the top and bottom, as well as on the sides. So when you roll it, notice how the roll's not directly on the words. That's the reason for the little space there. The roll should begin after. Yeah, so the words of Shema should not be, sufficient space should be there over there. Okay, continue next text, please, to be.
The mezuzah must be written on lined parchment. If the mezuzah was written on unlined parchment, it is not valid.
What's lined parchment? You ever go to the school supply section? You want the lined paper, the unlined paper? So you can pass this around, and you'll notice that when they take a piece of parchment, the first thing they do before even writing is they take a knife and a ruler, and they make lines. So if you've never seen it before, it's just interesting, just to see. You can see if this one has it. Not as clear. See.
Are these all handwritten lines?
Yes, and that's, the lines also are, that's a good question. The font has to be written by hand. Computers, printers, photocopies do not work. And that's one of the biggest mistakes you see in mezuzahs that are sold that are not kosher, is that they're written by computer. What about the parchment? Could those lines be done mechanically? It's a good question. I'm not a sofer, and I don't know the answer to it. I have to text my sofer friend. I'm serious. I'm going to do that. Just pass it around. So
Well, I
we can.
would think the sofa would have to do it, and as you said, with a ruler and a
I can see
sharp
lines.
object.
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah, now
because
you can
it can't be
yeah,
like
yeah,
a
yeah.
printed stuff.
see.
It
Correct.
can't be like.
But it's not the printing. Yeah, and I would have to see what the source is for this.
The Torah has lines.
Again, if the function of the lines are only to ensure that it's written neatly, then it would make no difference how those lines got there. But
Where-
if there's a meaning to the lines themselves.
Where-
So when it comes to the words are holiness. And we know that holiness has to be put down by someone who they themselves are responsible in that mitzvah.
Where does
A
the
computer
parchment
is-
come from?
Animal.
But there was no
So, but
printing
wait,
back
how
then.
is it
Kosher
processed?
animal.
Kosher, and is it processed or is it?
I mean, I'm sure it goes through. Yeah, there's a process
See,
to
the
turn it.
lines aren't even
They're-
delineated.
you
They're
can
just
see it.
like
You can see
indented.
it.
No, even
It's
through
an
here. Look.
indentation, yes.
It's an indentation, so it's not like somebody drew a line. It's
Correct.
like
It's just a knife.
yeah.
That's what it is. All it is
So
a
you
knife.
can't do that. I mean,
I mean, I'm sure there are machines that could
maybe.
do that quicker.
Yeah.
But there were no machines when this law was
Correct.
passed.
Correct. However, there are many things in for instance, I'll give another example. A mezuzah has to be kosher. Every word has to. We're going to get there. Some of the laws. One of the best ways today to ensure that a mezuzah is kosher is through checking it with a. But guess what they have to do today? Computer, and that's fine because it's
That's
not
analysis.
that's analysis. It's not creating the mitzvah. It's ensuring that the mitzvah is kept fine. So there's a difference between creating the item, which needs the holiness, and ensuring it's kashrut. And all Torah scrolls and mezuzahs are checked by computer today.
How they do it before computers.
They did it by hand, and
Slowly.
Laboriously.
it's a lot
Slowly.
slowly. Yeah, and there are even today
You
things
saw the
that
old Xerox commercials with the
Yeah. Okay, let's continue over here. Text to see some other laws. We'll do these briefly. Please, Steffi.
And then
Yeah.
nothing may be added to the text of the passages, with the exception of God's name, Shin Daled Yod, which is written outside the scroll opposite the word Vehaya.
So on every mezuzah, you'll notice on the outside, Shin Daled Yud, opposite the second paragraph.
Uh-huh. And this is all in Gemara.
This is all Talmud oral tradition. Correct.
But if for Sofrim, I mean,
Correct.
anybody can study
The
it, but
differences in opinions, minhagim, traditions, that would not be the text for any of the main laws. That would be the font. Fonts, very, very much so. There are differences in what we call the crowns on the letters. You saw the letters of a mezuzah have crowns on them, which is a more artistic style of writing it. There are differences in some of the stuff that goes on the outside. You'll notice that there's a Kabbalistic text that many have over here.
But how does that compare?
That's
with
on the
nothing-
outside.
But
That's on
it
the
says
outside.
nothing shall be added with the exception of
Oh, that's
Shaddai.
interesting. That's interesting.
And the Kabbalistic text says,
How? Good question. All right, we have a few questions for the rabbi afterwards for next time.
no, that I won't be able to.
So I
Are
have
you
two. I have two questions that need to be resolved. What is the meaning of it, and what does it mean when the Code of Jewish Law says nothing can be written except for Shin Daled Yud, which is written on the outside? If there's this, good questions. I don't have answers right now.
Moving
Continue.
on. There are 10. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay, let's now go, and I'm going to
We
paraphrase
want to know the
text 3.
Rima's opinion.
The Rama writes that.
It should be written opposite the. Oh, that's what you showed us.
Okay.
Okay, good.
Let's now go to text 3.
Okay.
Text 3's location, and I want to paraphrase this just because of time. This is what doors are obligated in a mezuzah. We know that the main places is the front door, as well as the bedrooms are very important. Many people put it on every door, but there are requirements what kind of doors need it. So it has to be a living space. It has to be a big room. It can't be a closet. It can't be in a undignified place. That's why you'll never see bathrooms or laundry rooms have a mezuzah. A permanent dwelling, no hotel rooms, or even right when you move in, it says only 30 days later. No, really. Are you obligated to put up a mezuzah? And there has to be a frame, which would mean doorpost as well as a lintel on the top. That generally is the requirements. Do text 4, Brian.
But what's a lintel?
Lintel is the top.
Door top, the door
Mhm.
frame?
To install the mezuzah, one should place it in a tube made of reed or any other material and affix it in place. The blessing, "Who has commanded us to affix the mezuzah," is recited.
Correct. So, like any other mitzvah in the Torah, we say a blessing, Asher Kedishanu, Mitzvotav V'Tzivanu, Likboa Mezuzah, which means to install a mezuzah. because it is a mitzvah. It's a biblical mitzvah, and therefore we make a bracha. And in the event you put up more than one mezuzah in your house, you only say the bracha once, and you should do it on the front door.
What if you install more of them subsequently in time?
Good. You would make a bracha on
Then.
each, yes.
Okay.
It's only like a one per
Time.
time. Exactly.
If you forget to make the bracha, does it invalidate the?
No. There's two different things. There's the mitzvah, and then there's the bracha. The bracha acknowledges that what we are about to do is something holy. This is not just a culture. It's not just a tradition. This is a holy, and so that's the function of a bracha.
But it's
So,
not the mitzvah itself.
It's not the mitzvah. Before, what is the mitzvah on the night of Passover is to eat the matzah. Now there is a bracha in which we acknowledge the mitzvah that's about to take place. But what's more important, the bracha or the mitzvah? Mitzvahs. So the same thing would be true when it comes to putting up the mezuzah. Because of time again, let's do text 5a. It's interesting.
Where is the mezuzah fixed? Within the entrance, within a handbreadth of the outer edge of the doorpost, at the beginning of the top third of the entrance. It was affixed higher up. If it was affixed higher up, it is acceptable as long as it is at least a handbreadth below the lintel. It should be placed at the right-hand side as one enters the house. If it is placed on the left-hand side, it is invalid. How is it affixed? It should be nailed into the doorway. Alternatively, one should hollow out the doorpost and place the mezuzah within. One should not hollow out a place deeper than a handbreadth, for that would invalidate it.
So this is 2/3 of the way up. This is the general. So you divide your door into 3, and it's done at the top third. Okay? There are some times where there are tricky situations, and I ran into one of them when I got this office over here. You can't put it in the doorway.
That door frame, really.
It's if you put it a third down, we wouldn't be able
Well,
to.
it's not, it's another problem. You'll notice that there is no doorpost in which you can put the mezuzah. So I put it on over there within what's called a handbreadth away, and that is under the circumstances the best you can do, not ideal. So that's interesting.
Can you put a glue stick and glue it to the?
There's no rules about how. The main
How
thing
you
is it
fix
should
it.
stay there. So many of the cases today have, this had the adhesive on the back.
Well.
So
Yes.
recently we put one up in the door coming in from our garage, and that's the door opens this way. And I thought you put it on the opening, and so I fixed it right there where it is, and I guess that's invalid. It's supposed to be.
So how
So
to
if the hinge
determine
is on the right.
how to determine right is a lengthy discussion, and I would love to do that. No,
Okay. I thought
it continues. This is a
I thought it was
short-
obvious back there where it said put it on the right.
So it's not because within it's not so it's pretty complicated. It's
If
pretty
the door
complicated.
opens to the left, or if I think it doesn't
Brian,
matter
when it
which way
comes,
the
I'll
door
say this:
opens.
when it comes to either front doors or garage doors, which enter the house, we do it on the right side as you enter.
Right. So and I put it on the left because that was the yeah.
No.
So
Gotta
now
move
you
it.
know. Now it's
Gotta
good.
move
You
it.
learn that you can move it. That's what's great about this. You can move it. Inside the house is a little more
that's different.
complicated. How do you determine right? For another discussion. But when it comes to entering the house, it's clearly on the right side. Okay. Let's we're
Which
gonna
means it
skip.
doesn't matter which way the door swings.
Correct.
It's always on the right.
It's when it comes to inside the house
Yeah,
where
I
there's
understand
all
that.
sorts of
Because
debates.
technically you reach with your right hand to kiss it. So if it's on the left, you're like crossing your body.
Oh,
I
no,
don't-
that's not why. That's the reason not a cry.
I don't know, I see people always, so that you wouldn't try to reach it with your left hand.
Generally,
you go-
mitzvahs are on the right side.
Yeah, so it's the right, okay.
We would, each one of these laws,
Unless you're left-handed.
we could study in depth
Yeah.
with all the conditions and why and how and when. Today's sort of a general overview. If you want to know where the tradition came from, you'll notice some people like kiss the mezuzah. Ever hear that? They'll walk in and they'll touch it or they'll kiss it. So here's a text from, again, 1,000 years ago. And this is not a law. This is only, do text 7, please, Karen.
7?
Yes. This is a note of someone,
7.
the Ramah. I'm skipping a little bit.
Okay. Some say that upon exiting a home, one should place his hand on the mezuzah and say, "May God guard my departure," etc. Similarly, upon entering the home, one should place his hand upon the mezuzah.
So there was a tradition that evolved where people would either kiss it as a reminder, Or they would even offer a short prayer. It's actually from Psalm 121. God should guard your coming and your going. So, yeah, say tiva good. So, again, this is not a mitzvah. There is a tradition. You'll see kids, my kids, sometimes they'll notice, kiss the mezuzah when they walk in. It's a tradition. That's not the mitzvah. But if you look at the mezuzah as a reminder, yeah, it makes sense that you actually touch the thing. Okay.
Speaking
Especially on a
of
long
kids, what about putting in a kid's room the mezuzah low so the children can reach it?
If it's it should be in the higher part. I pick up my kids.
Oh,
Yeah.
cool.
I do. It's a nice.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Every night we have a ritual. I say the Shema with them before they go to sleep. When we get up to those words, ukshartam lo uchtaftam al mezuzot, I pick them up and make it. So.
Nice. Very
The maintenance is important. Mezuzahs do go bad, and that's why this is not just today, but from way back when. Text 8. Janice, please read.
A mezuzah of a private person must be checked twice every 7 years. A mezuzah used in a public place should be checked twice in 50
And I don't want to, it means like a synagogue and why the difference. And again, these are all longer discussions,
Right.
why they didn't make a community. But it says that mistakes happen over time. They do. And I've seen it in my own life, where especially the ones that are outside the house, they can be exposed to the elements. And what makes a mezuzah kosher is there's a lot of laws that go into it. And it's very easy for a little thing to go wrong. And so I showed you the mezuzah over here. It has to be written by hand. No two letters can be touching. Okay? Two letters cannot be touching. Letter can't be rubbed off. If it's unclear what a letter is, that's a problem as well. So these what difference? These do make a difference. And just like when it comes to our taxes or many of the other areas in our life, details matter. When it comes to mitzvot as well, details matter. And if you're wondering even different grades of mezuzot, how come this one costs this and this costs that? I have, just for comparison's sake, and I'm not trying to sell anyone anything here today. This is not actually I did bring two mezuzahs in case. But here's a mezuzah that I recently got from someone who I went to their house. They wanted to check, they weren't well, and and I'm not a sofer, and I can't say that it is not kosher. I was going to send it in, and they said by the time I pay for shipping and I might as well just get a new one. So I looked at it, and it was useful just to have a difference between these two. And I want to pass it around. You can take a look at the difference. It's not the size that matters, because you can have small or big that are good. But you'll notice one has those little crowns on every single letter. One does not. One, the letters are far more faint. Some of these letters, it's hard to really make out what it is. So again, just you can pass it around, see the difference. And I'm just doing this because we know the difference when it comes to the phone that we get. People take a lot of time in deciding what phone to get or gadget, and we want quality. And when it comes to mezuzah as well, and that's why sadly I've changed where I get my mezuzahs from over the years. Okay, Chabad rabbi probably gets. I've changed, and I've come to see that the place I got it at the beginning, the quality was just not up to par. I've switched, and I've come to learn that if it's below a certain price, how long do you think it takes a sofer to write this?
Wow. Probably
A day?
No,
an
I've
hour,
been
2
an
hours,
hour or two.
So I'm just saying, if you see mezuzah for $20, I'm just throwing this out. You're wondering if it took them an hour or two. There's some costs involved in the materials. Something's not quite adding up over here. So, that's why the ones I sell are $36 here. That's the ones that I sell, and that's, for me, again, I'm not making any generalizations. I'm not saying that anyone below a certain price point cannot be kosher. I don't walk away without this. But it does raise question. Yeah.
So for a while, you would not have a mezuzah on your house. And the second part of the question is, do you say the blessing when you put it back?
Good question. Oh, if you're getting a check.
Yes.
If everything comes back fine, then you do not. If it's a short amount of time. If a decent amount of time goes by, then you would. I need to look up again what the definition is.
And if
Let
it's
us stump the
probably a
rabbi
new
over
one,
here.
you would say it.
If you got a new one, you would do it. But you see the difference between the two. All right. I want to finish. Yes.
Just one quick question. Does it have to be a
It-
certain
this-
Same
kind
word
of
on both sides.
ink?
And
Or
Good.
a certain kind of?
Yes.
implement to be
It
used?
must.
So
be
there is.
some-
It's very old fashioned. You watch a sofer do it. It's very, very neat. I would love to bring a sofer here to have a demonstration one day. You know,
Yeah,
for the
let's
kids.
do a workshop.
What I was thinking is do both a workshop as well as they could check people's mezuzahs in the area. Again, it's not New York here, so we don't have any sofas.
Oh,
It's
okay.
exciting over here. They do use, it's like an old fashioned, it looks like a feather. And the
Oh,
main
cool.
definition for the ink is that it has to be permanent. So there's
So
certain
also has-
types of ink that are permanent and do not fade over
Same
time.
over here.
Don't
Fade.
you have to pass being a sofa before you're allowed to write a Torah?
It's to be fully justified.
Yeah, but there's all sorts. There's no central supervision as there is by the laws of kosher. Let's finish up over here with big picture. I'm going to do a few more texts. And we touched on this on the beginning. What are we supposed to be thinking about when we do this mitzvah? What is the purpose of a mitzvah? Obviously, a mitzvah is beyond the reasons that we give. But looking at our history, what reasons were given for the mitzvah? Why don't we begin page 83, text 9. Do you mind reading?
One of the purposes of the mitzvah is to remind man of his faith in God each time he enters or exits his home.
Right. So we need reminders of our faith. The faith doesn't jump out at us in the world, often especially today. And it's supposed to be a reminder every single time we go in or out of our house that we have it. And in a sense, it's almost like the shofar that we have on Rosh Hashanah, which is that reminder, wake up a little bit and focus your life on that which is more important. Maimonides writes on 83, Hal?
On 83?
Well, it crosses over.
Okay.
Oh.
A person must show great care in the observance of the mitzvah of Mezuza, because it is an obligation consistently incumbent upon everyone.
Most mitzvahs are not always on us. Shabbat is once a week, and tzedakah is when an opportunity presents itself. Mezuzah is if you own a house, you have an obligation to have a mezuzah
What if you rent a house?
after 30 days.
Oh, that's right, you said.
Yes.
Through its observance, whenever a person enters or leaves the house, he will encounter the unity of the name of the Holy One, blessed be He, and remember His love for him. Thus, he will awaken from his sleep and his obsession with the vanities of time and recognize that there is nothing that lasts for eternity except the knowledge of the Creator of the world. This will motivate him to regain full awareness and follow the paths of the upright. Whoever wears tefillin on his head and arm, wears tzitzit on his garment, and has a mezuzah on his entrance, can be assured that he will not sin.
If only.
Because he has many who will remind him. They're called wives.
Yeah.
These are the angels who prevent him from sinning. As the verse states, the angel camps of God around those who fear him and protect
So,
them.
but of course, what's more important is what's on the inside than the outside. Maimonides writes, this is Maimonides' text. These reminders we need to think every now and then about that which is most important, and the mezuzah is that reminder. The other perspective of a mezuzah is, I think, what you touched, someone said, of ownership. I think it's important to have a home base from which we live our life. We call that a home, okay? Society has all sorts of values, all sorts of cultures. We don't necessarily want to always be swimming in whatever the latest situation that we need a home base. And the function of a mezuzah is to remind us, guess what, over here, it's Jewish values that triumph. And that's the function of a mezuzah, to have ownership. This is God's home, this is a home base. And I think it works both ways. When we walk into the home, it is, I'm leaving behind the schmutz of the world. My home, I'm going to be in charge of what comes in and what comes out. And when we go out, it's the values of my home I want to retain. I want that to stay with me throughout the day. And I'll finish just one last thought. You may have heard this before. And that is that mitzvot are mitzvot. They're not magic. They're not amulets. A mitzvah is a commandment from God. That being said, a mitzvah does have a physical effect as well. And every mitzvah does something else. For instance, when we speak about matzah on Passover, we call matzah the food of
Afflicted.
good, and also food of freedom and faith. The function of the matzah is it's a spiritual vitamin for freedom. That's the function of the mitzvah. So I can't tell you how that works, but the Torah says this is a fruit of faith. Every mitzvah has a spiritual vitamin. And it says that a mezuzah's spiritual vitamin, what is its spiritual function? Protection, it says. A mezuzah on the house is a form of protection on the home. Where did this idea come from? What's the first time in the Bible we have the word mezuzah? Guess what? It doesn't mean a mezuzah. It means a doorpost.
Yetziat Mitzrayim.
When they leave Egypt, the Jews are told to put something on their doorpost that their home should not be in danger. Interesting.
For the firstborn.
Correct, the firstborn.
Yeah.
So even over there, that concept of mezuzah at that time was
Well, that was on the doorpost. I thought it was on the door.
doorpost.
Doorpost.
Oh.
Doorpost. Put it on the mezuzah, and it's interesting how
I've
same
been smearing the lamp in
word.
the wrong spot in my house.
Ryan, you learned two things today: the right and the left, and where the lamb's blood should go. But that's why when you hear this concept of protection, it does, and there are many stories, some of which I've been privy to experience before, where mezuzahs helped, changing the mezuzahs helped, and as a Chabad chassid in particular, I know many times where people wrote to the Lubavitcher Rebbe about a particular problem they were going through, and the Rebbe would say, check your mezuzot. And it wasn't like a magic kind of thing. There was a time once where a tragedy that happened, and the Rebbe said, check your mezuzot, and they found out they were all bad, and the person said, is it because of my mezuzot? The Rebbe said, God forbid to say that because of the mezuzot, something bad happened. But the mezuzah is an extra protection in the home. Not because the mezuzot are bad, something happens, God forbid. Mezuzot can serve as an extra protection in the home. And I conclude even with the story I know of. Ham, a few other people were in the room when we watched a video yesterday. Pam, remember I told you one of the speakers we didn't listen to was someone whose name was Rabbi Grossman?
Yeah, the first or the second, because there were four.
There was another speaker called Rabbi Grossman, and he has a story where his daughter had a horrific eye infection, and it got worse and worse. They lived in Israel, they saw specialists, and they were unable to solve it. And one said it was a skin thing, one said it was an eye problem, and it got worse and worse, and finally they decided to go to New York to see better medical care. And while they were in New York, this was a few decades ago, the daughter said, well, anyways, in New York, let's consult the advice of the Rebbe. So they went to go see a specialist earlier that day, they had a talk with the Rebbe, and the Rebbe looked at her and said, I would suggest checking him Mrs. Zot. I don't know if it was the one on your room, but in the house. They called the wife who was back in Israel. He went with his daughter. She ran to the sofa. There was one word that was missing.
Missing?
Missing. Einecha, your eyes.
Oh.
So again,
Yes.
and this is a true story. And after which they went to this, they fixed it up and they went to this doctor. And it's a true story. You can hear Rabbi Grossman discuss the story himself. And he writes at the end, the doctor looked, we brought all the old tests and all the old, I don't know, what was, probably not x-rays, whatever it was in those days, all the old reports. And then he gave my daughter an examination, said, there's a problem. What I'm seeing today doesn't match up with everything beforehand. And he said it's a very minor issue, not nearly as bad, and he prescribed a remedy for it, and the situation got better. And he believes it was related to the mezuzah. So there is something very powerful about having kosher mezuzah in our home as a spiritual thing, as a spiritual protection, as a reminder of our faith, and to say that this is a Jewish home. And I think particularly when you don't live in a huge Jewish neighborhood over here, at least not, there's something beautiful about the pride that the mezuzah has and the display that this is a Jewish home. And I know I always get a lot of pride driving around and, there's a mezuzah, I never knew that. And as the Jewish community grows here, I get pride in seeing all the extra mezuzahs. We will hold it over here. For all the online audience,
Rabbi, real quick, Debbie's asking, she said, can we write our own mezuzah and would it be kosher?
if you learn the laws, Debbie, they're pretty complicated, the laws, Debbie. They're pretty complicated, the laws. I can't do it, but give me a call, Debbie, and we can discuss. Give me a call, Debbie. Debbie, we miss you here. Thank you, Amnon, and thank you for Nissan Communications for hosting this program every single week. And we will be back here, God willing, next Tuesday. Have a great week.
are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. Our weekly lineup of call-in programs includes Computers 2K Now with Amnon Nissan, My Life, My Will with Gisela DiCarlo, The Tanya Love Show, Health Then with Debbie Bruck, Breaking Free with Marilyn Shannon, Triangle Be Well with Howard Jacobson, Lunch and Learn with Rabbi Yisrael Cutler, Lessons of Vietnam with NCVVI members, Current Affairs with Amnon Nissan. And if you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section on nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Atomos.com, makers of quality video recorders and converters, CarolinaApparel.com, and DeltaForce.net.